So everybody in the world is worried about what's called stagflation right now. It's a big term that you guys are probably hearing on the news. It's a big term that you guys are seeing on the internet. It's a big term that you guys are seeing in your face in a lot of publications, and it has to do with the economy. Basically, stagflation is stagnant economic ability that the world has the potential to enter. And when I say the potential to enter, it's because there is not stagflation right now. It's a worry and a concern to economists and to what we're doing, but it hasn't quite happened yet. Now, when stagflation happens, it's when there's mass inflation and the economic growth is stagnant. There's no economic growth, and then unemployment goes through the roof. Because when there's no economic growth, there's no jobs, right? There's a lack thereof. I shouldn't say there's no jobs. There's always going to be jobs, right? There's always going to be a need for products and services, but there's going to be higher unemployment rate, and there's going to be a lack of jobs thereof. Now, in the past year, 2 years, we've noticed that there's a labor shortage, right? So how do we teeter-totter so aggressively from having a labor shortage to a lack of jobs? Boom, and plummet it. Well, a lot of people were in unemployment. The pandemic, there was a lot of people that were siphoning money from unemployment and through other sources. You know, there was a lot of bailout money that was happening, and people were getting stipends, government stipends. And so we sit back, and now people are going to be forced to go back to work. Economic growth is happening again, and the workforce is back in full effect. But we're starting to see that our economic growth is slowing down. Now, here's what's happened, is that traditional healthy economic growth is typically about 1.5 to 2% annually. And so people are looking back going, well, in the last 2 years, we've seen over a 21% growth. And in the last year, we've seen double digits. You know, we've seen a 14% economic growth. And so when you take like 1.5 to 2% growth and you push it all the way to a 14% economic growth, that's a hyper growth. But that's not the way the world traditionally has grown. So economists and the Federal Reserve economists, national economists that are with the National Association of Realtors, and housing being one of the number one economic expenses for the entire world. Okay, and when you talk to these analysts, none of them show massive concern as far as stagflation is concerned, and here's why. Because we've seen such rapid growth. When we talk about 2022, they're talking about someplace in the neighborhood of about 4.5 to 5% economic growth, which is more than double, almost triple what the historical annual increase of economic growth is. Still incredible. Now, compared to 2020 and 2021, yes, a slowdown for sure. So analysts are sitting back and they're looking at 2023 and they're saying, look, 2023, we should see about a 2.4% growth to 2.8% growth in 2023. So we're still 1% higher at the very least than what the historic annual average is and thereof. So when we look at things and we look at stagflation, if it does happen, something extreme and dramatic would have to happen to teeter-totter the effects that economists can't even see right now. And since none of us have a crystal ball, it's all speculative. We don't know that there's going to be stagflation. It's something that economists are looking at. None of the financial economists are concerned about it right now, but it can become something real if, for sake of example, the U.S. goes to war. You know, could be one problem. If we land up going to war with Russia and we go in and fight on behalf of the Ukraine and there's a world war, well, that could create stagflation. If the war against Russia and the goods and services, and we don't exercise our free trade agreements and start working with countries like Germany to start importing and exporting, then there can be an issue. If we don't open up the XL pipeline and start bringing in more crude oil and more oil production in the United States, potentially that stuff could create stagflation. But we have the resources, natural resources and economic resources worldwide to prevent all of that if exercised correctly. Now, politicians can shift that. So depending on how you look at things, you know, Republican, Democrat, it really doesn't matter. It all has to do with negotiations. And so what we really need in this country at a point in time like this is good negotiators, people that are reasonable. It's kind of like somebody going through a bad divorce, right? And you have two people that are both unreasonable fighting over the same thing, and no one's willing to give, right? And so that's what happens when people go to war, is you take two countries and they're fighting over the exact same thing. No one's willing to give. And so like any negotiation, there's a give and take. And to get what you want, you have to be able to give a little bit to take a lot of what you need. And so what the world needs right now to prevent stagflation is good negotiators on a governmental standpoint and an economic standpoint, so that way we can keep the country running. We're sitting in a very strong economy, one of the strongest economies that the U.S. American people have ever experienced in the history of the United States of America. And so when we talk about stagflation, and we talk about the ability to have an increase of unemployment, yes, it could happen. But right now, unemployment has actually dropped, where if you look at it just a few years ago, now to where it was 2 years ago during the pandemic to where it is now, we're just over 3.5% unemployment rate. And so when we look at a 3.5% unemployment rate, we're sitting at a lower unemployment rate than we've had over the last 2 years. And so people are going back to work. The unemployment rate is going down currently. Yes, interest rates are starting to rise a little bit, and inflation is real, right? We still have boats floating in the ocean. We don't have the ability to get that stuff ported and exported, but we have the ability to be able to make those economic changes. We have the resources. So we'll watch and see what our government officials do. We'll see what the world leaders do. And so as you're watching this stuff, don't listen to what's being said on news publications and on the media, because if you do, you might find yourself crawling down a black hole in a dark room waiting for economic changes that'll never happen. And so understand, look at national economists, look at what our world leaders are doing. Watch and see how things are migrating with our world leaders. So when I say our world leaders, I'm not just only talking about our presidents and our economic leaders, I'm talking about our financial leaders. You look at people like Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. You look at people that are actually holding the forefront of economic growth because they have the largest corporations in the world and the wealthy. They have the mass majority of the wealth in the world, and they employ the mass amount of people. You want to take a look at what those national corporations are doing. And international corporations, they're not even national corporations, international corporations are doing. Economists that work for them, and they have demographic resources that they're looking at everything, demographically, economically, they're looking at what's happening nationally, internationally. And so when they're looking at stuff, even though as an individual investor, you might be sitting back going, what should I do? Should I invest? I hear what's happening on Fox News or CNBC or NBC. And you're sitting back trying to make a judgment based on a political ploy from a news station as opposed to a logical change based on what's happening economically. And so make sure that what you're watching holds value. So if you're reading the New York Times, if you're watching, if you're going out and you're watching our world leaders and you're seeing what they're doing, what they're publicizing, and how they're shifting in business, that's the way you should be pivoting in business as well. But as far as stagflation, right now, I wouldn't worry about stagflation. Unemployment's at a good place. Yes, we are seeing inflation. We're only seeing one of three variables related to stagflation. Economics have been in our favor, and the economic growth have been in our favor since 2009, and we have been on a slow and steady incline. And then we hit hyper growth when COVID hit, the exact opposite of what everybody thought was going to happen. And so we are sitting in a bubble right now, and yes, something has to give, but as to what's going to give, none of us really know yet. We don't really know if stagflation is anything that's going to be real. That was something that happened in the 1970s, and so they're looking back historically saying, okay, is what happened in 1970 what's going to happen today? Is that potential there? Yes, but are we there yet? Absolutely not. So before you start selling off all your investments and starting to start burying money in a coffee can and burying in your backyard, halt for a little bit. The warning signs will be on the wall. They're not quite there yet. We're still seeing favorable economic growth. Keep investing, keep working, and keep putting your money to work for you so that you're not going out and working for your money. Ladies and gentlemen, that's how you go out and compound your success.
This is news dissected for the betterment of your investments. Click below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and give us a thumbs up and pound that like button for us.